executive session at 3:05. And how about we take a 10-minute break?
Right.
3:15.
Stop it. Stay 3:05.
It is 3:05. Allowing our CEO to negotiate and execute an engagement letter with Bradley and Pearson LLP and Sheep and Stone LLP for legal services. I will entertain a motion.
Did anybody raise their hand first?
You win.
Please do. Yeah.
Second?
I would make a motion that we allow the director to negotiate and execute an agreement with Gravely and Pearson LLP and Sheep and Stone LLP for legal services on a contingent fee basis only, not to exceed 33 1/3%, and providing that no cost shall be payable for the reimbursement of any investigation or litigation experts, except in the event of a recovery.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote was unanimous. Thank you. And that takes us into our regular agenda. Item number 1, consider monthly financial statements for July 2019. Marissa?
The financial statements start on page 12. They go through page 19. All of this information was included in the packet. For the sake of time, I can answer any questions. Our current year-to-date variances are fairly consistent with how we've been trending in previous months. We've also included an additional schedule after the financial statements on page 18 that Board Member Gilmore responds to a request that you had to reconcile our DCTA and NTMC budget with the original budget as approved by the board. So that's on page 18. It shows the budget with our consolidated May financials, one amendment that was approved by the board at the June meeting, and then reconciles between the two annual budgets for DCTA and NTMC to show that breakdown. And then on page 19 is the capital projects budget report. This shows the project budget as well as life-to-date expenditures on those projects. If there are not any other questions on those, I believe you asked for questions. Yes. Page. Are there any questions on the financials for July?
No questions? Okay.
Otherwise, we would ask for approval of the monthly financials as presented.
Okay. Any motion?
So moved. Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote was unanimous. The motion carries. Thank you, Melissa. Agenda item number 2, presentation and discussion of monthly financial report. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know that.
They're slightly different.
Okay, for July 2019. And this is for information only. Marissa?
Starting on page 20 are 3 separate financial reports, the sales tax receipts monthly reports, as well as the monthly mobility as a service update and any necessary budget information to update the board. Our sales tax report and memo starts on page 20. Our receipts for the month were favorable 3% over budget. Year to date, we are trending slightly over budget to the tune of 0.78% over budget. Year over year, this is a 2.8% increase. On page 21, you can see the monthly breakdown, and then 22 and 23 show the sales tax collections for our member cities as well as the other transit agencies in Texas. Page 24 is the monthly mobility as a service update. As of this report, we had 5 contracts waiting to be executed, 4 of which were for software. I'm pleased to report that the 5th contract was executed this past week, so the next report in next month's packet will show that the only 4 contracts we have pending are ones with software companies that we've put on hold indefinitely pending a need for that software. no task orders have been executed to date on any of these contracts. Page 25 is a discussion of budget information. This is where we will communicate any budget transfers that have taken place during the year. As of this month, we did have one adjustment that we've made to grant revenue in conjunction with the FY20 budget. Around mid-year, we start looking at our grant revenue, looking at the timing of the capital projects that we have, as well as the availability of operating grant revenue. And so in the FY20 budget, we have adjusted some of the timelines with the capital projects to move some of the cash outlay from FY19 into FY20. So in conjunction with that, we are recognizing reducing the FY19 grant revenue to record that grant revenue in the FY20 budget to be in line with the capital projects. And then we also have recorded a reduction in our federal operating grants based on the availability of funding from FTA. This is all just a timing issue. We're reducing the funding in FY19. We're expecting to receive it in FY20 instead of FY19. Are there any questions on any of those reports?
Okay, just
Yes.
kind of a general one.
Yes, sir.
At some point, since I'm new to this, I don't know where we are pension-wise, pension advisor-wise, how the contract's negotiated, all that kind of fun stuff. At some point, I just would like to understand that better. Last thing I want to find out is we've got this, looming deficit for some pension funding or whatever. I don't anticipate that, but it'd be like, arms around.
Yes, so we have a ever increasingly growing note disclosure in the CAFR that talks about our TCDRS pension and any unfunded liability. I think as of last year, we were 90% plus funded. But I can find the exact portion of that.
Is that liability, it's part of the audit every year, right?
It is. And just as a point of clarification, we've separated out this agenda item 2 from, regular meeting agenda item numbers 1 and 2, because the financial statements and capital project report are items that have to specifically be approved and accepted by the board every month, and then the other 3 that we're talking about now are just for informational purposes. So that's why we have those split up. Any other questions on those?
Okay, so this takes us to agenda item number 3, presentation and discussion of proposed FY2020 capital and operating budget. Again, informational item. Amanda, are you doing that?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We have had 2 budget workshops in July and one on August 1st going over the FY20 proposed budget. So in your packet, today we're going to go over each aspect of the budget, operating, capital, revenues, as well as review the long-range financial plan. I do want to briefly introduce the different exhibits that were included in the packet. So Exhibit A, and we'll go into some of these in more detail throughout the presentation, but Exhibit A is the long-range financial plan, and that all of the exhibits begin on page 26 of the packet. Exhibit B1 is the change in net position. This is the same version that was presented at the budget workshop. We've added 2, and I believe they are green sheeted for today. We added Exhibit B1A and B1B. Basically, it takes the change in net position and it kind of chops it up a little bit. The bottom line is the same, and I will go into more detail, but I do want to point those out. Exhibit C is the capital improvement plan. Exhibit D is our budget contingency plan. We did not bring that forward at the budget workshop, but it is something that we adopt as part of our budget each year. And it just goes over what we would do if we had a decrease in sales tax 2% and above, and if we had exceptional increases as well, how we would handle that. And we also have a section in there that discusses grants as well. So it's pretty standard. If you have questions on it, we can go over it, but I wanted to include it because you will see that in September as part of the adopted budget. Okay, we'll start with an overview of the long-range financial plan. I believe everyone in here has seen this. Just briefly going over it, you'll find operating revenues are at the top. That's our passenger and contract service revenues. And we have non-operating revenues where you'll find the sales tax and our operating grants as well as investment income. The operating expenses are the next section, and they are divided by bus, rail, and G&A.
This is page 26.
Oh, I apologize.
Packet.
Page 26, sorry. The next section goes over capital outlay and any major maintenance items we've identified. And again, we'll go over these in more detail. You've got capital grants and then our debt service. And the yellow section at the bottom, it shows our internal debt service coverage. And that's at 1.25. That is our recommended, that is included in our financial policies. So our net income, which is towards the middle top section, we always require that that is 1.25 over our debt service coverage.
Or better.
Or better. We always strive for better. And then we've got, sorry, we've been doing it. Okay. We have fund reserves, and these are identified in our financial policies, which we adopt every year. We bring them to the board typically in the October-November timeframe for review and adoption. The fund balance reserve is equal to 3 months operating. We have a sales tax stabilization fund as well. We have a fuel stabilization fund and a capital and infrastructure fund. And I would like to point out the capital infrastructure fund, any use of these funds has to be approved by the board, so staff will bring anything forward if we need these. A good example is when we had the FEMA projects with the flood in 2015. If we wouldn't have had the funds necessary to cover those projects, since they were a reimbursement basis, we could have brought that to the board and used these funds and then replenished this fund with the FEMA funds we received. And then the very bottom line is our net available fund balance. So that's just a brief overview of that. So a few assumptions that are built into the long-range model. The bus and rail revenues are assumed at a 1% increase annually. We have general inflation at 1.77. That is based off of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. It's just the CPI average over a number of years.
Which CPI do we use?
In general,
Yeah, sorry, general.
and it's over a 9-year period, from 2010 to 2019.
We assume a labor cost increase of 4% for bus, and that is an average based on our CBA, our collective bargaining agreement that is in place right now. G&A and rail cost increase of 3%, and that's in line with each of our member cities. And we typically every year we assume a 10% increase in health benefits based on our average running rate. And then we will go over fuel in later slides as well.
Before you leave the long-range financial plan, I want to bring the board's attention that there's a little bit over halfway down on the proposed FY 2020 budget, there's a line item called infrastructure acquisition. And I'm going to be making a recommendation to the board that we take $3.5 million of that and move it down to the net available fund balance. Until such time that we have a good use for it and how we can actually spend the money.
Can I ask you a real quick question? We're pausing here under proposed FY 2026 under rail operating expenses. Why does it show that dipping? Is that just a typo or?
That would be, the majority of that is probably based off of our purchase transportation, our first transit contract.
Okay.
So I would assume, without having that level of detail in front of me,
It just, it goes
The
up
majority is
steadily, and
probably
all of a sudden
assumed
it
to that.
drops, and it starts going back up. I just didn't know in 2026 what the story was on that.
I can dig into that and
Okay, I'm just
get back.
curious.
We built in assumptions in the contract, I don't know that this is it, but we built in assumptions as far as how many miles and hours of service we're running, how many vehicles we're running. So there's a contemplation, just like we're having in 2020, where they're dropping the cost per mile.
Okay.
My guess is that's what it is, but we'll double check and
Okay.
make sure that's true.
And just to be clear, for those of you that attended both budget workshops, a lot of this is very much repeat from those previous meetings. Just as a reminder, this is our official public hearing. After this presentation, we'll open it up to the public for any public comment for you all to consider in conjunction with the budget, and then in September, we'll be bringing it back officially for approval.
I wasn't trying to start a fight.
Trying to start a what?
I'm not trying to be a troublemaker.
No worries.
Sure you are.
We'll move into looking at the change in net position, and again, that is exhibits B1, B1A, and B1B. Those should begin on, I believe, pages 27 through 29 of the packet. B1A and B1B are the green sheets that were at your place. So Exhibit B1, again, as I said, is the exact same schedule as presented at the budget workshops. It includes just an overview of it has bus, rail, and G&A all together in the operating expenses. And the only difference moving forward, in order to provide you guys a clear path, Exhibit B1B takes that schedule and drops in depreciation, because depreciation was not on the previous schedule that we reviewed at the budget workshop. We needed to get some additional information on the capital projects we were moving forward with and things in order to finalize the depreciation numbers. So that is the only change between B1 and B1B, and then, or B1A, excuse me, I'm sorry. And then B1B takes the same budget and it splits it out by the DCTA budget and the NTMC portion. Because in September, when we adopt it, NTMC will actually be adopting that specific piece of the budget, and then the DCTA board will be adopting the DCTA specific piece. So I wanted everyone to be able to see how it looks, because it will look slightly, these will be on actual separate exhibits in September for adoption. So it just is taking the same numbers that you have seen and dissecting it a little bit different.
Like it. I like it, I like it.
So just a few points to go over agency-wide. Again, DCTA salary and benefits. We have a 10%, we assume a 10% increase in health benefits every year. And the bus salary and benefits, we base this on an average rate for each operator, and currently it's $18.34 an hour, and it's outlined by the CBA agreement. And we assume a 10% increase in health benefits for them as well. And Marissa, would you like to touch on anything regarding the CBA portion?
Sure. We've identified in the right column the increase in benefits that were provided with the new collective bargaining agreement. The increase in these benefits totals about $600,000. We added a fully employer-paid, employee-only coverage under the new CBA, as well as increasing the employer subsidy for all other coverage types. So we increased the dependent subsidy on those. For vision, we added employer-paid, employee-only coverage and added a 50% subsidy for dependent coverage. And then life and disability was previously a $15,000 coverage level, and we doubled that, increasing that to a $30,000 coverage level for all full-time and seasonal employees. So we just spelled out these specific items since they were a large dollar amount impact in a year-over-year comparison.
Just real quick, just refresh my memory. On the health benefits, is that saying that it's a 10% increase to, DCTA staff and the transit operators in the amount that they're able to, that goes towards paying the premiums? So help me understand, what is that?
The 10% that we budget is the 10% employer portion. So
Okay.
the total premium less whatever the employee pays.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. For both DCTA and bus.
Right.
On the next slide, we've identified the staffing levels for each of the departments within G&A as well as the NTNC operations. That includes bus drivers as well as maintenance, customer service, some administrative staff, supervisors and dispatchers. The notes out on the right column identify every change that we've made from one department to another. The net impact of all of these changes shows a 1.5 FTE increase in DCTA employed staff and a 1.5 decrease in NTMC employed staff for a net 0 increase in FTEs as part of the NTMC reorganization, as well as some reorganization that we did internally with DCTA. We identified several positions that were either converted or deleted, and then there are 1.5 FTEs that are identified as new positions in the budget that will be presented on the very next slide. Are there any questions specifically about the staffing levels?
And I asked this last time, so that on the third-party contract operations, you're showing 1.5, but it says total third-party contract operations, whereas it says total DCTA FTE staff. I know that a few budgets ago, there was a different paradigm applied to third-party staffing with First Transit, I think, where it was based on out. So that doesn't represent 141 people, is that correct, or how's that?
Correct. We
Okay.
have 160, 170
Okay.
some employees under NTMC, some
Right.
of which are part-time or seasonal that don't work
Okay.
the full hours. So this is calculated based on the number of
Full-time
work
equivalent
hours.
or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. On the next slide, we've just gone over a couple of the new projects that or new programs that are identified in this year's budget.
Okay, so you have a little over $250,000 for bus operations. That includes the bus operations buyer, which was on the previous slide. This individual would assist our maintenance department in ordering supplies consistent with federal rules and regulations so we could draw down those federal funds. Large vehicle repowers, that's to help us extend the life of existing vehicles, and then adding $30,000 to bring our total passenger amenity budget to $100,000 for next fiscal year. And the next is rail operations, an additional $100,000 for PTC annual operating expenses. This is a new expense. We have entered revenue service with PTC, or positive train control, and now we will have to maintain that system. So that we're estimating that would be somewhere between $100,000 or less, but at this point we don't know because the system is so new.
We have two items under G&A. One is an HR assistant. This would be a part-time 0.5 FTEs. The costs shown here for both the HR assistant and the buyer are fully loaded wages and benefits. The part-time position would be an unbenefited position, but this portion does include employer taxes. This position would assist with FMLA reporting, leave reporting, ensuring that our Affordable Care Act compliance is in alignment. We have several competing high importance issues in the HR area, FMLA, leave, disability, workers' comp, as well as ACA, that all are very time sensitive, and so this would allow us to focus on each of those things and have a greater turnaround time on those items.
And the final item under the general and administrative is to prepare and relocate our IT components from that shared space that you saw a picture of during the budget workshop, where currently our IT infrastructure at the Denton Transit Center is paired and sharing space with the fire suppression room and the janitorial space.
and it may be on a, let's see. Okay, we talked about a security guard or a public safety official at the downtown is it in,
Yes,
where is it in?
It's not on the slides, however, the guidance from the board was that we thought it was important to have, try to find it in the budget, within the budget, and that's what we're planning on doing. So unless there's concern or we want to open it up for further discussion, our intent would be to provide the service because we really need it, but we'll find savings to.
Okay, sure, okay,
Okay.
all right, yep, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yep, you bet.
Moving on to operating revenues for the bus, you have a Schedule B2. This is just a snapshot of that same schedule that's in the packet. I believe it's on page 28. Passenger revenues are calculated using projected ridership and the average fare per rider. So we've listed those components for each of our services for you. Contract revenues are specific to each service and the contract terms agreed upon. Service hours, contract rates, and fuel expenses are all part of that calculation. Overall, we're projecting a 8.4% increase in the bus revenues for FY20. And we are transitioning, you can see this in the operating expenses as well. The FY20 budget anticipates more of a transition into more of the mobility as a service. So we've increased ridership for zone services, and it could decrease ridership related to the fixed route. So we've assumed that going into the FY20 budget. Rail revenues, we do assume an increase for FY20. In FY19, we assumed an average fare per rider of $1.16. And in FY20, we are assuming $1.50 per rider. And currently, we are year-to-date through May of 2019, the average fare per rider we're showing at $1.79 per rider. So it's still a conservative estimate moving into the FY20 budget year.
Non-operating revenue includes investment income. We've assumed a average yield of 1.5%, 2% for is what we're currently seeing, roughly 2.2% in FY19. The long-range plan assumes a 1.5% in the out years, and that's all based on what we end up showing in the long-range financial plan with the net available fund balance and investable funds. Miscellaneous income is included. This is largely attributable to the reimbursement from the City of Corinth for the rail station planning project that was approved by the board at the June meeting, and then federal and state grants as well. And as we've talked about, these the capital grants are all related to the project timelines that we have for those, and then calculated average operating drawdowns for items like preventive maintenance and operating assistance. The detail of which is shown on the next slide. This shows the detail of how the operating funds and capital funds are broken down by project and by expense type. Sales tax, based on a 2% increase from the FY19 projection. Our average growth from 2013 to 2020 is a 5.3%. We talked about at previous budget workshops, some of our member cities going into FY20 have assumed a flat sales tax projection, a 0% increase. Others have budgeted up to a 4% increase. So this is kind of splitting that gap. We still believe this is very conservative as far as that goes. And then as we reviewed, we also have the sales tax stabilization fund that gives us a little bit more flexibility as well.
Okay. Bus operations, so as we talked previously, the main drivers for the bus operations cost are obviously the operators and fuel. Just showing you here a summary of the miles and the cost per service. We currently estimate $3 a gallon, and again, that's conservative. Next slide. This goes over all the main drivers, and again, the main driver of cost for bus operations is operator wages and fringe benefits. million. Next is fuel at 1.2, and then parts, tires, and fluids at just under $1 million. Also included, we've separated out for you the purchase transportation, lift services. We provide lift service at UNT, Highland Village, and then the Alliance lift service. You see the dollar amounts there. Also under purchase transportation is the van pool program. I did want to mention, before Lindsay does Capel, just, we did receive a letter from the city of Denton on August 1st, just after the second budget workshop, and it is green sheeted in your packet. The city of Denton is requesting that DCTA provide shuttle service from Monsignor King Outreach Center to Our Daily Bread. Those are two social service agencies. Currently, Monsignor King closes at 8 a.m. and Our Daily Bread opens. Monsignor King closes at 8 a.m. and Our Daily Bread opens at 10 a.m. So we worked out a potential shuttle service that would allow us, as long as Our Daily Bread agrees to open an hour earlier and Monsignor King open an hour later, we can run a shuttle using vehicles coming off of peak service Monday through Friday. They've asked us to add Saturday service. We don't have peak service on Saturday, so that means we're going to have to bring a driver in just to do that. So the total annual cost of that is $77,000. It's proposed that we would implement it in January, contingent upon Monsignor King and Our Daily Bread adjusting their hours, and that 9-month cost would be just under $60,000. So we wanted to bring that to the board for consideration as well.
And so just to be clear, since this is the first time we're talking about this specific project, this is something, the 57.5 would be added to the documents that are in front of you today to be then approved in September.
That's good. Just as a piece of data, Our Daily Bread served its 1 millionth meal today.
Wow.
They've been in service for 19 years, so I think that's part of we want to make sure that there's a seamless transportation between Monsignor King and Our Daily Bread instead of people walking from there across the square, and public safety as well, just for people walking across the streets and stuff. So yeah, it was a big celebration, so I just wanted to bring that to y'all's attention. That's quite a milestone, actually.
I'd also like to add that there was very good collaboration between the city and the DCTA and the social service entities that are described here. And I just wanted to publicly show my appreciation for everybody that tried to find a solution. I mean, I think it'll really help folks with transportation needs. So we're very much in favor of adding this modification to the budget.
Can I ask just a quick question? I don't want to rain on this parade, but is a ridership associated with this? I'm trying to figure out what our direction is. If just a city says, I want this, we do it, or is there got to meet a threshold? I mean, it may be the greatest thing in the world, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out, how do you go about assessing whether something is deserving an extra route or not?
Sure. You want to handle that? No, you don't.
I mean, isn't the answer we're working on that?
Pardon me?
Isn't the answer we're working on that? I seem to recall having this discussion, we don't have a metric.
Okay.
I think, so it's a complicated issue, right? I mean, it's not always, you don't always do things just for ridership purposes. But in this case, we have a challenge between the city and folks not having transportation and where they're dropped off on existing routes. And so there's a gap between the transportation that we currently have, letting people out, and you have to walk through businesses, and it's not great. It's not a great situation. I don't know the total number of folks we have that are using it. I would say it's probably about 100 or so that would be.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong,
occupied
this
vehicles.
may be the greatest use and the greatest resource for this at all, but I'm saying we have finite resources as an agency, and I know the road's good intentions will pave you to bankruptcy, just saying, I want to take care of this group. Plus, you get one city saying, I want this, and this, and the other cities start going, wait a minute. So I just want to make sure we've got some forethought into our policy for doing this, at least moving forward. I mean, this may be great, I don't know, but if we don't, I just see a lot of piecemeal stuff out there, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to bust you, because I know it's a meeting, but, yeah.
Can I just, I think, and that's a good question. So do programs like this, whether it's Louisville, Highland Village, Corinth, Denton, these special type of shuttle programs, those are considered ridership, or they're not considered ridership in the scope of DCTA ridership? I mean, I would think that they would be part of the ridership
It will be
calculation.
considered ridership. It will be considered a regular fixed route. We will add two what we call trippers. And so if one vehicle coming off peak will run the first shuttle, and then another vehicle coming off peak, instead of going back to the yard, will run the second shuttle, and those will be advertised because we have to open them to the public.
Sure, okay.
But we will count that ridership when we do our annual reporting.
And I really appreciate you bringing up that point, because I think that was one of the reasons for the cost allocation study and the efficiency study, to see, okay, how are we doing from an efficiency model, and therefore if it frees up.
One passenger costs you $50 and the other one's costing you 10, you're like, wait a minute,
Right.
or however it works.
Yeah,
Sure.
so, yeah.
That's item number 10 on the agenda. Cost allocation efficiency.
Right, yeah.
And he's not.
There
Yeah.
is one other service we want to discuss with you that is not currently included in the budget. We have discussed it with the board previously, and that is contract service with the city of Coppell. We brought that to the board previously and got the head nods and direction that was okay to go ahead and please explore that partnership with them. So I do want to turn it over to Lindsay to give a few more details about what, again, is currently not included in the budget, but later in the agenda, we will either approve or not approve our contract with Coppell. So if you approve it, then we'll need to include that into the budget.
That's the presentation. So I'll pop up like a groundhog here. So we have, so the Propel lift service is being proposed for $100,000 total. $10,000 would be earmarked separately for marketing and communication outreach efforts, which would be led by the city of Propel. And then the actual invoiced services, for lift specifically, would be $67,500, those are completely reimbursed costs from the city of Propel, and then a 25% administrative fee on top of that, which would be about $20,500. So that's what's being proposed. So again, as Christina mentioned, regular agenda item number 11. I'll go through all the details for that program, and if that local agreement with the city is approved, then we will incorporate that into the purchase.
Thank you, Lindsay.
So is the net on that, it costs us $10,000?
No, it's, we're including the total just to ensure that that $10,000, that's the budget that was set by the city of Capel. So we're not touching that. It's just, we are wanting to identify that that is specifically allocated for marketing and communication so that it's attended to by the city.
So they're gonna pay all of it back, whatever costs we incurred. That's what they budget. So it's
Correct.
absolutely revenue cost.
Yes.
Can I ask our attorney one quick question? Because it looks like, I hate contracts that are perpetual. I know we've got an audit, but it basically says if you don't cancel, it keeps going. Is that something you can add on?
On the mobility services, yes, we would say that's one cost we have in there. We do have out in those. It would have to come back on, it does allow for an out.
I just don't know if these automatic renewals, because I want to know what I'm voting on each time. So, I know this one's a net.
Yeah, and we can include that if we want to modify it, we'd rather do it for X number of years and then come back before we get that part home.
As a vendor, I love the evergreen. As a board member, yeah, they
I mean, we're kind of a vendor there.
Yeah, I think we got on the agenda.
We'll get there.
Okay, so moving on from bus to rail, again, main drivers of rail expenses relate to our service contract with First Transit. The majority of the expenses there are in the top 4 lines, train crew hours, car miles, management administration, and dispatch operations. If you add up all those costs, it's a little over $6 million, or 65% of that $9.7 million total. The next cost driver is facility maintenance, and that's of the rail operations and maintenance facility, and that's 20% 28% of the cost. And you see all the other costs associated with rail operations. And again, next slide kind of goes over that, wages and fringe benefits. That's for the 4 DCTA staff. That's the AVP of Rail Operations, the Director of Railway Systems, Senior Manager of Rail Operations, and a Project Control Coordinator. Fuel services, we talked about the Denton County Sheriff Department. That's 40 hours a week of a Denton County Sheriff to ride the A train for fare enforcement. And then landscape contracts for our rail stations in the downtown Denton Transit Center. And then the next two are insurance, and the largest portion, again, of cost is the purchase transportation from First Transit under the rail contract at $9.97 million.
The sheriff, is the only responsibility for fare enforcement?
There are other, I mean, he also, it depends what the issue is and where it is.
Okay.
So he did assist and he will assist at the downtown Denton Transit Center. He is there. We had an issue earlier this week
Right.
where we had 2 passengers get into a physical altercation. We were able to call him and he responded.
Okay. Thank you.
He also responds to issues that are similar on the rail line. This past happening, we've had, I don't know how, we've had vehicles just go down the right of way, almost into the way. He really enforces the laws all up and down the
Yeah.
rail line.
This slide just shows the key components of the general and administrative piece of the budget. Obviously, the major drivers on this budget are the wages and fringe benefits, as well as professional and legal services. We have the major items listed: printing, computer and software, dues and registrations, as well as the operating leases as well. The capital improvement plan, that is Exhibit C, and that is on page 29 of the packet. And this shows a breakdown of the current capital projects. This is part of the schedules that will be adopted by the board in September. And then in the following slides, each project manager will discuss in more detail the items.
Go back. So fleet, we currently, in the FY19 budget, have a little over $1.4 million for the purchase of 12 small buses. We currently are not able to purchase those. We buy them off of the Oklahoma state contract that has expired. They have a new RFP out, and we are waiting for that award to happen so we can pull the trigger on those 12 buses. So those funds will be rolled over into 2019, and then we have 2020. And then we have an additional million in 2020 for the purchase of 3 non-revenue vehicles, as well as 8 small low-floor vehicles. And as we discussed at the budget workshop, we will hold off on those and reevaluate based on the transition of service from fixed route to more mobility on demand base to see if we still need the 8 small low-floor vehicles.
Do they have a date certain on the Oklahoma contract?
Well, they didn't, and then they just extended it. So the last date was the end of August, but it's moved multiple times, so I can't say that's the end date.
Thank you.
And we've looked at other options and state contracts, and there isn't anything that has the vehicle for something similar that we're looking at. So.
When you're talking about a small local, what kind of passengers?
It's about 6 to 12.
It's a big Camaro.
It's not a Camaro. It's like a big Transit Connect, and they would be low floor, and I believe they have 2 wheelchair securement spots. So, next is professional services and technology improvements. So we talked about the 2 Stadler diagnostic laptops. That's $80,000. Again, the current laptops that we have that rail maintenance staff uses to diagnose electronic issues with the vehicles are no longer serviceable. I believe they're using like Windows XP. And then the next one, scheduling software. This is a grant that we had with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. Originally for scheduling software, we have redirected, or what's the word, amended our agreement with COG to use those funds for a Train the Trainer program based on comments and feedback we received from our Health and Human Services roundtables. I'm going to skip Marissa, and I'm going to go to the shared use mobility study. These are funds that are left over initially from the comprehensive operational analysis, and then those funds, what was left after that was used for the shared use mobility study. We still have just under $60,000 in federal planning funds, and we would like to use those funds to conduct for consultant assistance with the service changes as we integrate mobility as a service. And one of the items later in the agenda relates to awarding a task order to HDR, which these funds would help cover some of those costs. Back to you, Liz.
To jump up one to the integrated fair payment of $600,000. This is to allow us to look at either a reloadable card option, something similar. DART is in the process of rolling out or has rolled out a GoPass tap card. It allows customers to load cash onto a card at any of several retail locations or at the customer service window, etc. It would also allow us better ridership tracking. This is one of the potential items that we could look to postpone into 2021 or free up the cash associated with this project if we wanted to wait and see after our service analysis and after we really execute some of the mobility as a service contracts, kind of what our fleet makeup really looks like. The funds associated with this would be to put a validator on every vehicle in our fleet as well as at platforms. So obviously if we require less fleet, we wouldn't need to outfit as much fleet. So this is something that we have no intention of pulling the trigger on October 1. So if it's something we want to wait and revisit later in the fiscal year and appropriate the funds at that point, we could certainly do that.
I'd suggest that we leave these funds there earmarked, recognizing that we can move them. And it might be that we want to redirect those funds. It's contradictory to what we were talking about with the infrastructure funds, but I'm going to be talking about the path forward item on item number 10. We may want to look at using some of these funds for that. So let's just, for now, leave it where it is. That's what I would recommend.
And last on the slide is the server and network infrastructure, $43,000. This is standard planned replacement cycle of servers and storage, provides fail-safe remedies, and it is a rollover project from 2019 into 2020. Trail safety improvements, the $124,000. We are currently, let me back up. We've performed a rail crossing study and have a list of recommendations for trail safety enhancements. So these funds would be used to install some type of enhancements regarding safety along the trail. Examples of things we've done in the past: Z crossings, enhanced signage and striping. There's still a full list of recommendations that we use these funds for.
Is the remarking that we're going through now because of the assessment impacting those numbers?
This is, well, no.
The remarking had to do with a FRA site inspection where the markings for the what do you call it? Oh my gosh, quiet zones.
Quiet
Sorry.
zones.
For the quiet zones, the approach from the road to the rail crossing requires a visibility striping, and so the FRA came in, did an assessment, we definitely recognized that there were several crossings that needed to be restriped. So that's on the road, not on the trail. In this case, this is trail signage to say on the approach, for example, you could put information with regard to your approaching crossing, on the strips, crossing.
But I've got you now.
You got me now.
Right. We need to get there.
Because Railroad Street's getting redone today. I don't know if it's you or the city.
So I don't think that one is us, but we are working with the city of Denton on doing some median cuts at a couple of the trail crossings, and we are using these dollars for those. So whatever remaining funds are existing, I'd like to
rail safety improvements, and again, that's 200,000, that's an annual amount, like Christina mentioned. It's like, start ticking off some of the items included in that study. It's also there, some examples of things we've done in the past. We use some of these funds to close the Eagle Point crossing. Going forward, we could use these funds to address issues or concerns that we might have at other crossings, including Colorado and Brinker.
That was the best webcam in Denton County, that Eagle Point crossing.
The last item on the slide is the Louisville Bike Trail. We have 2 miles left in the trail that needs to be completed. It's currently under construction. It's about halfway finished. I went for a nice little tour last week. It looks great. We anticipate it being finished the first quarter of FY20. So the remainder of these funds will roll over into FY20 to allow us to complete the construction.
No, it's not gonna be mountain bikes. We're not having it. Let me be clear.
So I'm going to take 3 of the 4 items under the major maintenance items: the road crossing refurbishments, the rail operations and maintenance facilities scheduled maintenance, and then the Stadler vehicle OEM or original equipment manufacturer replacement. Those are all part of a regular and ongoing maintenance program and plan that is required in order for DCTA to maintain a state of good repair, which is a federal requirement of our facilities and our assets.
For the canopy repairs, we've talked about that one. This amount will be used for 2 different stations, and recognize that we have more stations to do. We'll do it using a phased approach, but the 434 will cover 2 stations to fix the fascia and the soffit from the water damage.
And we talked about earlier the bridge at the bus operations and maintenance facility. The engineer estimates to resolve that issue is $125,000. Again, it's currently structurally stable. It's not the bridge itself, it's the approach that is sinking. So we would like to address that, because right now we're just continuing to Band-Aid the issue instead of fixing the issue.
It's the potholes on surface, right?
I'm sorry?
Repairing the potholes on surface.
Next is positive train control. So like I mentioned earlier, we are currently in revenue service demonstration for PTC. So we are closing out that grant. We have those funds, we have a little over $1 million left, and we would be rolling those over into fiscal year 2020. And then new funds for PTC enhancements. These are funds, we have a total $5 million federal grant from the Federal Railroad Administration called the CRISI grant, and don't ask me, I forgot what it stands for at the moment.
Consolidated Rail
Infrastructure Safety something.
Improvement.
Thank you.
There you go.
But we're only recommending putting $1.78 million in FY 2020, and again, right now we're conducting a study with LAN to determine, looking at track geometry, to determine if there's anything we can do with the existing track to help reduce the impact or the delays associated with implementing PTC.
And the infrastructure acquisition, 3.7, this is the item we discussed earlier, that we recommend reducing that number by 3.5 and moving that down in the financial plan in the unreserved? Restricted reserve. Unrestricted reserve.
Net available.
There we go. Somebody tell me. And then the brownfield remediation, this is the project that's currently underway at the rail operations and maintenance facility. We do expect to close this project out, but it'll be next fiscal year. The phase we're in right now is working with the city of Louisville to obtain the municipal site designation and actually closing the unplanned landfill with the TCEQ in order to make that property developable for future initiatives.
It's not a landfill, that's a dump.
Yeah.
That's a technical term.
Okay, the documented dump.
And then we've also broken out the principal and interest payments associated with our 2 outstanding debt issuances from 2009 and 2011. The total is about $1.8, $1.9 million in principal and roughly $1 million annually in interest, and that is included in the long-range financial plan.
So our steps forward are, we have a public hearing today at this meeting, and then in September, we would incorporate any feedback we receive from the public hearing or the board today into our budget, and we would bring it for actual adoption at our September board meeting.
I've got a couple things to talk about. We are talking about the efficiency study, and I know item 10, we've already mentioned that, so would we consider putting a placeholder in this year's budget for the cost of the efficiency study?
We could do that. I don't know exactly how much. I'm thinking that $600,000 for the fare payment or integrated fare could be repurposed for some of that, since we don't know how much the integrated fare payment system is going to cost either.
Okay. And then the other one is, should we be talking about a placeholder for that impact fee?
I think we should discuss it, but I don't know that we need to make a decision at this point as to how much to put there. I'd rather have a more in-depth discussion about it, and then based on that, we can determine how much to take out of, to either use one of the reserves that we have or to take net available cash and create a reserve.
Kind of an unnecessary signal.
Yes. That's why I didn't put a number.
Any other questions, comments?
I just want to make sure I have something.
Yes, sir.
Other than grant funds, are there any other revenue sources that track related to the restrictions?
Well, our sales tax by statute is technically restricted to only be used for transportation and mobility uses. But otherwise, no, our grant revenue is specific to projects as we identify them in the formula funding, or with the associated capital project, but passenger revenues, investment income.
So we can use bus revenues anywhere we want, we can use rail revenues anywhere we want, we can use sales tax anywhere we want. None of that's tracked.
I suppose with some caveats, yes.
Sales tax is supposed to be leveraged for transit purposes.
And so when you say transit, does that mean rail?
It could be rail, it could be bus,
Loss.
loss. It's when you start
Okay,
thinking about,
Pretty much.
it's difficult, but if you start talking about using funds for things not related to transit,
What non-transit expenditures are in this budget?
An example could be a sidewalk. You're using the funds to build a sidewalk connecting maybe from the Downtown Transit Center to a bus stop. That can be used, those funds can be used for that. If you're talking about a sidewalk that is within, let's say, Highland Village, and it doesn't connect transit, it's just in the neighborhood, you cannot use the amenities of that.
Can't just do a general hiking bike.
And then the other restriction would be once we obligate it under a contract, the expectation is to execute against that contract, and you would obligate the funds as part of a contract. Typically, we have a statement in every contract that we sign that says we have the ability to, in case of funds not being appropriated by, or the
Annual appropriation clause.
appropriation clause, that we can back out of that agreement without penalty. And we would have to pay whatever services have been rendered. You typical close out of a contract, but that's another form of obligation where funds, I don't know that we track on every one of our contracts that we provide to the board what obligations we have at any particular time, just the course of doing business.
Okay. And I think I was confusing that. And then is the integrated fare system, is that kind of what you told me was?
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm gonna go with this. Kind of a deal with the devil. In other words, you tie yourself
I
into
wouldn't
software
quite-
upgrades and
I
other
wouldn't
other
call
issues.
quite.
Okay. Those were
call
not
it
your
that,
words.
but
Those were
yes.
my.
That's not how I would label it.
Yeah, that was.
We have an opportunity to become part of a larger integrated fare payment system. There are provisions that would allow us to exercise an option to allow us to put in the same fare payment system that the two other transit authorities are implementing. The cost, the specific cost to that is going to be contingent upon what we do with the mix of our, how much private, how much direct service we're providing. And, I don't think that we have a clear path for that right now.
Well, your words were not yours.
But we've got you now.
Yeah. That's all.
On the Chrissy grant, I know there's an outstanding question on whether other things have to occur. Do we have a timeline when that's gonna be? And if we think if that's not to be discussed here, then we'll discuss it some other time. I just wanna bring that up again, because I'm just fully aware that there may be some conditions on that, or may not be, we just haven't come to some resolution on
I
that.
do believe, I'll answer the other one. So I do believe we are checking with the FTA to confirm that they have a clear understanding, or sorry, the FRA, to confirm that they have a clear understanding of what our project is and how our system operates, because we're starting to think they may misunderstand and be requesting something that's not necessary.
There's language they're requesting that we put in in our access agreement with STAR. So that's essentially what we're waiting on.
Right, okay. Some clarification on that from the
FRA,
FRA.
Federal Railroad Administration.
And then depending on that, we may have to go back and have some conversation with DART, or we may
Correct.
not.
But there is a glimmer of light.
Okay, great.
Very, yeah.
But it's a spark. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so that brings us to agenda item number 4, public hearing on proposed FY 2020 capital and operating budget. So the public hearing on DCTA's proposed FY 2020 operating capital budget to allow board to receive public input on the proposed budget is now open at 4:17. So we would ask that if there are any speakers, keep it if we can to 3 minutes. And Brandy, do we have any other requests? I have one. Did you say no?
No.
Okay. At this time, and when you come forward, if you could give us your name, address, and so we have Jim Owen. Wherever he wants.
I'll just hold the corner.
Wherever
I
he
gotta leave
wants.
the stuff in front of me. My name's Jim Owen. I'm a bus operator at the DCTA. And I've been assigned for the last 7 years to come to the board meetings. My president, Kenneth Day over there, thought that was a good idea. And I've been here longer than most of the board members. And for the new ones, they're all new. I follow the money, I read the packets. I'm also on the City of Denton Traffic Safety Commission for the last 4 years. And I've been on the negotiating team, union negotiating team for the last 2 times. So, I was also on the 2030 Plan Committee in the City of Denton. But what I have to talk about today is, I'm gonna take my union hat off and put on the financial thing. One of the things that's coming up is, you're talking about small buses. Talking about spending over $1 million for small buses to get rid of 3 fixed routes, 1, 2, and 3. Those fixed routes in the City of Denton. Route 1 is 29 stops, 4 shelters, and 5 connections. Route 2 is 47 stops, 7 shelters, and 13 shared connections. And Route 3 It's 39 stops and 1 shelter. Now, the logic of the small buses is that I've been told, is to right-size the fleet because of the ridership. But 71% of the buses in America are over 35 feet long. And that's a statistic from Afton. Okay. We have on our lot, at the Denton lot, we have 12 buses, 12 Gilligs, the green ones, that had new engines put in them and transmissions. Back when we were still at Mayhill at the dump. They were brought over and used for a while and then parked. They've been parked for 2 years. But they run fine. So why are you spending $1 million on a small bus? The other thing is, there's no Title VI involvement here because if you go to on-demand service, you don't have to justify it with poor people, with disability people, any of that. So if you're talking about pulling up all the poles on all these stops and all these shelters, which by the way cost about $8,000 to put in each one of them, then you need to think about this. And I'm not trying to be picky, I'm just saying you need to start a conversation here about this. Because one of the things that you wanted to do is you wanted to spend $150,000 to hire a civil engineering firm to plan this. And what I would suggest, here's the guy, Christoph Spieler from Houston. He and another guy, Jerry Walker in Portland, are the only two that have ever increased ridership on fixed routes here lately. He's in Houston. Pay him, because the people that DCTA has paid to increase ridership have not been successful at all, especially on the rail. But somebody like this, you could bring them in and talk about it. And I thought when you were talking about mobility as a service, you were going to add on to the fixed routes. We have in the city of Denton, in Louisville, Highland Village, you've got planners, you've got development people, you've got traffic engineers, but you have no say in where the stops are. UNT tells us where the stops go and how many routes there are. And they're paying $3 to $4 million. Chris is paying $12 million. And, you know, he just takes your word for it that this is where it ought to be. With the growth in the cities, especially in Denton, it seems to me you've already got synergy in the pricing, in the tickets and all, how much they cost and who's taking them and all that. You need some synergy between the three cities of the stops, economic development, this sort of thing. And I just think you are new. You need to you're asking great questions, but you need to take a look at spending money to downsize what I consider dumbing down the service in a large metropolitan area. You need to take a look at that. And like I say, instead of paying somebody with no success, pay this guy. He increased Houston 20% on fixed routes. And Houston right now is going to the voters for $5.5 billion for transit. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any other speakers who'd like to come up that have not signed in?
No.
Okay. So hearing none, I am closing the public hearing at 4:24. That takes us to agenda item number 5, presentation and discuss a bylaw modification plan. Lindsay?
So This item is on the agenda today to seek direction from you all today on the timeline itself and the bylaws modification process as we go through this over the next couple of months. Before we go through the detailed proposed timeline, however, I kind of just want to walk through the exhibits that are in your agenda packet. There are quite a few.
They're also at their
Yes,
desk,
you
and they
also-
were emailed on Friday.
Yes, so you have it in your email from Friday. You have copies at your places, and then it's also included in the backup as 3 different exhibits for the actual draft of the bylaws. As you recall, the board had directed staff to engage Frank Stevenson to draft the proposed bylaws. He's with the firm Lockwood. And it's also important to note that Mr. Stevenson took our current bylaws, not any previous revised iteration of the bylaws, but our actual current existing bylaws, and used that to amend per SB 1066. He also made additional cleanup modifications to the document, noting that this is probably the best time to just go ahead and do a full overhaul of the document while we have the opportunity and it's already open for discussion. So in your packet, you'll see Exhibit 5 is the bylaws document that reflects all of the proposed changes, and those are pages 58 through 69 in your packet. And again, you also have that at your place. It's fully tracked. It will show you every single minute change that he made, and that also includes the cleanup language for that. Exhibit 4, which is on page 47 in the backup, is the draft with only the more substantive changes. So those are going to be primarily the revisions made as a result of SB 1066. And then Exhibit 3 is the clean version, and that's on pages 37 through 46. That version incorporates all of the proposed changes that Frank had made to the document without any of the track notes. So it's clean, very easy to read. And then to tie all of these together and to provide a more concise overview of outstanding items, Mr. Stevenson also provided a document that identifies the major issues that the board may want to consider in the bylaws. And this is laid out in Exhibit 2. That's on page 36. This document would also be part of the conversation that we anticipate having at the September board meeting, which we will go through here in a moment with the timeline. So that's all I have on the bylaws exhibits walkthrough. So before we get into the process, the timeline itself, are there any questions regarding the 4 exhibits? So on the screen here, you'll see just kind of a condensed timeline representing kind of the major milestones that we're looking at in the timeline. And then I just wanted to kind of put some quick hits up here for you. Didn't want to bog down with a crazy timeline up there on the screen. So in your backup is Exhibit 1, pages 34 and 35, is the full timeline schedule. It's 2 pages. We just want to be sure that you are comfortable with this proposed schedule. Seek your feedback on any changes you'd like to see. And so you'll see the first entry here in the timeline is for July 10th. As mentioned earlier, this was when staff was directed to work with Frank Stevenson on these bylaws. Next, he provided the draft bylaws to staff on August 14th to ensure that we had enough time to get it in your packet, get it to you all on that Friday for sufficient review so y'all could start doing your thing. And then today has been set aside for the timeline and review process discussion. The next item on there, the bylaws review and feedback period, we are proposing just over a 2-week window from today to September 6th to review the bylaws individually and to seek feedback from your appointing entities. similar to what we've done, you know, kind of, maybe 2-3 months ago, lost all track of time now. But this is kind of a clean slate, kind of a restart for that. So as you review the document, we ask that you use the clean version to provide feedback and comments. And so we can certainly send you a Word version of that document to make it a little bit easier to go in and actually do tracked comments. And then send that document to Brandy. We will then take all of that and compile it into one master document. And then we will include that master document in the agenda packet to be distributed on September 20th. September 26th is a scheduled board meeting. We expect to have a full review and discussion of all of the combined feedback during that meeting. And from there, we will take all of the discussion points, all of the agreed upon language, incorporate that into the next draft iteration of that document, and update it and distribute it to you for the October 18th board packet. And then we've set aside October 24th's board meeting for another full discussion with an item on the agenda for the board to approve the final draft.
And
So
Frank is available for those meetings?
he absolutely is, yes. Today, the specific purpose was to review the timeline itself and to make sure we have the process that you're amenable to, and so that's why he's not here today, but he is absolutely available to bring in for the more substantive piece of that conversation. So again, as I mentioned earlier, want to get your feedback and direction on this. Happy to answer any questions or provide clarification and take direction on that.
So I'm very comfortable with Frank and Joe's team, so we can hash that out, because I think Chris sends in his, I send in mine, Sam sends in his. You're going to miss nuance. You know, you're going to have the red copy and the green copy and the blue copy. So I would feel better, and maybe it's just the way my brain works, if we could maybe accelerate this time frame a little bit and come in with our changes, but I don't know if I need that much time before I have a workshop with Frank to do that. I'd rather do this, might be pushing more than I think we can do, but I'd love to have the bylaws done by the fiscal year starting by October 1. I don't know if that's doable or not. Get to that.
Well, we'd only have one more meeting.
I think it really comes down to how that meeting shakes out, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
We'd have to make the agenda lighter so we could spend more time
Right.
workshopping that.
this to me is a good worst case scenario. My best case is we're done by October 1, but I get that we could be in here hashing and need another iteration. I get that.
What's that?
Yeah, because that's you get paid extra for that, right?
Oh, yeah.
200% of what you get paid.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just my, you know, my perfect world. I understand that I may not get my perfect world, but that's what I would like to see personally if we can get through that.
We could list it for consider. Joe was actually suggested maybe what we could do is list it for individual consideration for the 26th. If we're there. If we're not, then it goes to the next month, and then we can look at potentially holding a special session if the board wants to go through bylaws. Yes. Yes.
Sam?
I like this stuff. I'm sorry. I've never met Frank, for instance. Like, you know, some of these things that are on the critical items list, it's got acronyms I don't know. You know, it's talking about things we discussed, being in the bylaws, like the cost analysis. I'd like to hear what context was that discussed. If that's, you know, if those things are going to be placed in there, I'd like to have a little more. I'd like to have an opportunity to discuss it, consider it before I vote on it with the full context. But I think y'all have, which I kind of understand. If you have the context, maybe that sounds like a lot more time than you
Sure. Yes, Claire.
I think going to that point is that if we were to have a workshop before sending it, I think they're on this list that Frank has provided, which are things that are substantive decisions. I feel like the board needs to kind of discuss that before Frank and everyone starts making their comments. Like it seems, going back to your point, there's things that we all need to get on the table and discuss policy-wise. That seems like maybe that next meeting needs to be Frank and Joe facilitating a discussion on those policy decisions. The board makes a decision on how we're going, what direction, and then we follow up with any other nuanced changes we want to make after that. So at least that would give the lawyers direction on where to move for the board.
Because you're gonna have that conversation regardless.
Yeah, you either get a mess of
Right.
Yeah,
everyone
that's-
giving their
that's
comments
fair
or
point.
everyone
Right.
on the same page.
Right.
The only benefit to the way I think it's structured is if y'all like it, in other words, there may be issues on here that are fine. In other words, you don't want to make any
Or
change.
non-issues, yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of non-issues.
Right.
That he may have identified as an issue, but it's really not an issue. Then we don't have to discuss it. But I mean,
Yeah.
if we need more,
Right.
I'm fine with more, because I'm thinking the bylaws are gonna be in place for years,
Yeah.
right? The less is what makes me nervous.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, I think if we can incorporate, I think it'll help, you know, we do have kind of an asymmetrical data set here on the board, and anything we can do to help kind of level
Absolutely.
that history, I think is helpful.
Yeah.
So I can walk with that.
And that's kind of why we went with a pretty conservative.
But if we
Schedule.
can maybe front load some of that
Yeah.
conversation, maybe that would help.
It's a good idea, Claire, thank you.
Okay, so what I think we're hearing is that you want to hold a special call board meeting prior to the September 20th board packet distribution.
No, I think it's sticking to the schedule, but
That's
making
not
sure
what
at
I'm
September
saying.
26th, we have Joe
Right.
and Frank facilitate a discussion
Right.
of the substantive items.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No special call.
Finding a date
No.
for all of you
Yeah.
is really difficult.
I am not advocating more meetings. I want to make that clear.
Mayor?
So, Sam, to your point, I mean, because you're right, there's board members, new board members that are not privy to 6 to 8 months worth of conversation that occurred. So we can, and that's what I tried to get to, or at least begin the conversation back at the board retreat. So really would like to find a way to where that satisfies that sort of gap for you and maybe for you as well, or anybody that's interested in that.
I didn't even know Frank exists. I just know it's a piece of paper with Frank's
So
name.
how do we do that? Because I think of taking the time, it could be a 2-hour discussion to sort of, not relive, but to summarize the previous discussion. We can do that in a board meeting, so I'm open, but I think it's critical that you all have some of that very detailed information, because it's a huge gap. I mean, I can understand how it is you guys know what's going on, it's sort of here, y'all been talking behind the curtain.
I'm like gonna make up a new person so y'all feel like you don't know.
Well,
Well, Sally said, and Frank heard her say it, so.
Well, and maybe we could start the meeting earlier. I do want to be sensitive because like Sam was telling me, I've got to call and let them know I'm going to be, y'all have a council meeting today.
Yes.
So I want to be sensitive to, we're going to be talking about scheduling these meetings, but maybe if we could move it up a couple of hours, Mayor, and just,
Yeah, I mean, are you on Thursday?
yes,
Yeah, I don't,
Start earlier.
On September 26th,
Just
instead of
that-
starting
just
board
that
meeting
one.
at 1:30,
unless we need,
have a workshop prior to that.
would that work for,
Yeah, I mean, if we start at noon, I mean, that should give us enough time, right?
yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
the schedule?
I think for the history and context,
Huh?
I think an hour and a half for going through the history and context
Okay.
of SB 1066
Yeah.
and kind of what got us here for the bylaws revisions.
For sure.
I think that would be sufficient.
Okay.
If it's more than that, you're gonna have people checking out.
Yeah. Me too, maybe.
You got 90 minutes for most folks, that's the
Some
way it
have
is.
less attention span than others,
To
so.
speed up our cadence as we talk. What do you mean?
All right.
Okay, yeah, good discussion. So if we can do that September meeting at noon,
Okay.
and then have Frank come for that, make sure he's here for that first
Yep.
part. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for getting that together for us. That takes us to agenda item number 6, consider resolution R19-10, adopting DCTA's board governance rules of procedure. Again, you should have some handouts at your place. And Christina?
Okay. The agenda is page number 7, or sorry, the memo is page number 70 for this item. And if you recall, Chris just alluded to, Mayor just alluded to the October 14th workshop that we went through with SGR for the board governance. We have taken the feedback that was received at that meeting and incorporated that into the draft, which was sent out in the board packet. I will tell you, I'd like to discuss 2 more edits after legal review on page 7, and they're actually very small.
Minor.
Page 77, under the Code of Ethics.
No gift cards.
Item B, where it says occasional items with a value less than $50 may be exempt from the provision. We need to put in there excluding cash and gift cards. So that will be added. Maybe turn to page 80.
No gift cards, guys.
Under page 80, under citizens, as far as meeting decorum. So
Okay.
it's items
The top.
C, Romanet 3I.
Mm-hmm.
Midway through, the sentence starts with any person, making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks, and it goes on. He is recommending we remove making personal and impertinent, that language out. Can you explain why?
Yeah, the reason why, one of the bills that was passed, this past legislative session, basically said that someone can come in here and they can direct their comments at a person individually, so long as they're not slanderous or, using profane language, they can do that. Where before we said always direct the comments to the board, now they can be directed at a particular person.
So everybody be on guard.
Impertinent,
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty subjective.
Yeah.
Other than those 2 edits, staff or legal did not have any additional edits to add. I ask if you have any additional edits.
So, I'd kind of like to put this one on hold, simply because if there's anything that conflicts with the bylaws in this, then we're going to have to come back and change it. So,
We did discuss that with legal earlier today, because the conflict of interest portion is in both.
Right.
So we can
Table.
table
Or
it.
just take no action, so
Just take-
take no action on it
I,
right
I,
now. Yeah.
I don't disagree we need this, I just think it's cart before the horse right now.
Okay. So one thing, if we can move forward on, if everybody really is okay with the 1 meeting a month, I would love to clean up our calendars. So if that's an item that's not going to be changed in the board governance document, and it's going to be consistent with the conversation that occurred at the board governance workshop, then I would, upon board direction, we would like to direct Brandy to cancel all those different committee meetings that are on the calendar, and even cancel the monthly meetings and start those over, because it's a little messy right now. We have outgoing board members who have already left, but they're still on, and we need to add new. Is there any issue with taking care of the calendar as far as the meetings go?
Or any issue with just reducing it down to 1 meeting? I mean, so the packets go out. If you have any questions, I mean, you always have the opportunity to pick up the phone, call Raymond, Christina, and have those discussions. But this is the time when, this was kind of like, today was kind of like what it would look like if we go to that 1 meeting a month. Except maybe not this long.
The agenda seems to be flowing well.
Heavy,
Okay.
heavy
Well,
conversation.
Brandy had a very good idea, that she will not send all cancellations and new meetings all at once. She will send cancellations probably on Monday, okay? And then on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll give you a couple of days, she'll send you the new ones. So she'll wait a day before she sends the new ones. Nothing's worse than getting flooded with all these things in your inbox. It gets confusing. So please watch for those on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
So, because of all that, how do we want to deal with agenda setting for that? Do we have maybe a deadline when you want us to communicate items that we'd like to see on the agenda? How do we
2 weeks? Sorry.
Did we talk? I thought we had
We
talked.
talked about a couple weeks
Right.
time, I think. That's my recollection.
Right.
Like a week
And I may
ahead
miss
so
that 'cause I
they
had
can.
stuff.
Yeah, I think we did talk about 2 weeks.
And we also have included on today's board meeting agenda at the end, an opportunity to provide a request for adding to the agenda.
So if I might request a part of the process that we just put a reminder out there for the board that, hey, you've got till this deadline to get things on the September agenda or on the October agenda.
And we suggested that the board members provide that to Brandy. She's your board support, so that she can serve as our clearinghouse, and then that can come to us and make sure that it's getting on the agenda.
You like, you want, yeah. Yeah.
The dates that
And maybe just a calendar. That provides the deadline at a certain point.
You can send that out to, we'll go ahead and get we'll do cancellations, do board meetings, and then
Reminder
the deadline
notices.
for the reminder of agendas.
Could you just erase my account and start over?
Oh.
I'm gonna delete all the meetings we have.
He's wanting you to do it without him having to accept it and sign. We feel your pain.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Christina. And that takes us to agenda item number 7, electing DCTA board officers and approving resolution R19-11. Just to kind of remind the board of something we had talked about. So historically, we had chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary. We talked about, because the secretary position really doesn't necessarily do anything. Historically, everyone else takes care of the notes and things, and obviously, so we thought of maybe combining treasurer, secretary, if we feel like we need to leave that in there, or at least for now until the bylaws are gone through, because we still have chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary.
So the state law requires chair, vice, and secretary.
Correct.
Okay. So,
And Frank had identified merging the secretary and treasurer on item number 10 of his recommendations for discussion topics.
So we could do treasurer / secretary.
yeah, I think.
And
either
that be
of the
one
three makes
position.
sense.
Does that make
What's the
sense?
treasurer do?
Currently, we don't have one.
Well, but they would sign checks and
Oh, what do they do?
I mean, I could imagine it might be statutorily required or something. I'm kind of, it's almost a legal question. Because
Yeah.
if there isn't, it implies to me someone's doing something they're not doing.
I think it was
No, I
check
think-
signing was it, wasn't it?
The treasurer historically has been the primary check signer, although we utilize historically the chair, vice chair, and treasurer, whoever is available to come to the office and sign payments. We
They're
use
all
all three
listed
for that
as-
function,
they're
and
all
they're all
listed as-
approved signers
Has
for
the
the bank.
treasurer also historically been the chair of the finance committee?
Correct.
Which we don't have finance committee anymore.
And one of the lists on the 10 was you wanted to eliminate or retain the treasurer, just to move the discussion out about eliminating it.
Well, I think we have a board of 5 now, and if we had 4 executives,
That's kind
3
of-
makes it. Because,
It's just insulting to one person.
well, I'm good with going with what the state tells
The rest
us
of
to
us
do.
are officers. You're just-
You're not.
Yep, you're the guy.
Last picked.
TJ, you're good with what?
I'm good with going with what the state mandates,
Yeah.
which is the chair, vice, and secretary.
Okay, so those will be the 3 positions we'll be addressing today. So I will entertain nominations for the chair.
I nominate Ms. Diane Costa.
Second.
Any other nominations?
Does anyone want to do it?
Okay, is it a vote? Is it a vote we take? Yeah.
That's why we did it quick.
Okay.
Why don't we do this, let's get all the nominations and then we'll take one,
That-
approving a resolution.
Okay.
And name the.
Sounds
name the
good.
state. Yeah.
Nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate TJ Gilmore.
Second.
And nominations for treasurer / secretary, and I would like to nominate Randall, since you have some experience in transportation.
Second.
Okay, so that's the list. It sounds like you got that.
So make a motion approving resolution R19-10. And let's name all the people
So for chair, Diane Costa, for vice chair, TJ Gilmore, for treasurer, secretary, Ms. Randall.
You don't have, we don't have a resolution for that, it's just, yeah, go ahead and make a motion.
Okay.
We do have a resolution. It's R 1911.
Page 84.
Wrong one.
Gilmore, yeah, I said that.
On governance. Yeah, I don't have a nice binder.
I was gonna say, we'll have a binder for you next time.
No whining.
There we go, you're right, exactly. Thanks, Mark.
All right, so are we good?
Yep, we're good, just go ahead and.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The vote was unanimous, the motion carries.
And for R 1911, since I said 10.
Yes,
All right.
thank you for correcting me.
Wait, who motioned to pass the resolution?
Did somebody say something?
Who motioned?
I don't think anybody did.
I think Diane did, but
I
can
Oh, did you?
said
Okay,
yes.
I thought
And
I
then-
thought you read it.
Yeah,
Okay.
second.
And then,
I don't know if anybody seconded.
Yeah.
I think one of us did.
you
wanna do it again?
you second.
Come on, Sam.
Let's do it again. Redo.
Oh my gosh, I can't keep track of you guys.
I'll move we adopt the slate as presented. Does anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the vote was unanimous, the motion
Let's
passes.
do it one more time.
Oh. Third time's
There's
the
gotta be
charm.
somebody who hasn't moved and seconded yet, come on.
Okay, so that brings us to agenda item number 8, consider appointing a regional transportation council representative and alternate. I would like to ask the board humbly to consider me continuing to serve as the RTC representative for DCTA.
I would fully support that. I'd like to respectfully request that Mayor Watts be our alternate.
Mayor Watts doesn't look like you.
Do you get a vote?
Are you available? Should we check the calendar?
They are on
It is where we're in
the-
Arlington.
It's alternate.
Oh, yeah, that's alternate.
There we go.
So Diane would be the representative,
the-
Chris will be the alternate?
Yep.
What days of the week?
It's the fourth
Thursdays.
Thursday afternoon.
Those should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, you nominated him for something, that's what I.
Yeah, that's
Second Thursday of the month.
paybacks.
It happens. It happens.
Second
Second
Thursday of the
Thursday
month,
of the
1
month.
to 3.
Oh, yeah, that's one.
Okay. Okay. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote was unanimous, the motion carries. Agenda item number 9, presentation and discussion of agency procurement and purchasing thresholds.
No, there wasn't a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?